Welcome to careforcustomers.com, the call center management series. Today's session is on the complete contact center budget. And every year comes time to create a new budget, and it's difficult to remember all of the different spend items that you have in a contact center. So what we did is we went around, gathered all of those items that you would typically expect to see in a budget, have them in a nice concise list for you, and we'll go through each one of those items in the major sections that they appear in or should appear in your budget, and at the end of the session give you an email address that you can reach out and we'll give you a copy of this budget. So let's get started. So first of all, we've grouped them into 7 major categories, and they are staff, employee cost, facilities, your ACD PBX telephone system, telecommunications costs, data communication costs, and finally information technology. So we'll dive into each one of those as we go through the session. Now what you'll see is capital, lease, and expense columns. And what we've done here is we've said that some of these expenses are going to be in a capital perspective, some of them are going to be a lease, or some of them are going to be a monthly expense. So if some organizations do not require you to budget for capital items and sometimes not even leased items. So by categorizing that, what we suggest is you go back to your financial folks when you're running through your budget and ask them if you should include things in this particular category. So more on that as we go through. So with monthly staff expenses, what we have here is an example of a contact center with 200 FTEs in it. Now, if your contact center is smaller, and most of them are smaller than this, then simply delete the roles that are not applicable for your particular organization. And in the annual salary columns, salary and annual cost, we've just given a North American perspective of what that role may cost an organization. Again, very flexible, need to put in your own numbers. So let's go through it. Vice President, this is someone who is probably Vice President of Customer Care, Vice President of Contact Center Operations, that kind of role. And reporting to them will be a director or a few directors and managers. And the ratio side is what we've said is that sometimes you may not have a position filled, but it's always good from a budgeting perspective to know what your annual spend is likely to be, is ratio out the number of managers based on the number of supervisors you have. And as you can see, what we've done is we've said there's be one supervisor for every 12 agents. So if you have 200 agents, then you're going to have 17 supervisors. So that kind of perspective. Then of course you've always got support staff in a contact center. You have trainers, you have the quality assurance people, you have reporting, people who produce your production reports. You have a forecast planning, workforce management type role, so you need to include those. And we've got receptionist and secretary. If your contact center is away from your main corporate office, a different part of the city or even a different, state, province, country, then you probably have a receptionist or someone who greets visitors coming into the facility and helps out with other rudimentary tasks within the center. So you need to include that person in your budget as well. So that's monthly staff expenses. Let's go through some of the employee costs. Benefits, you need to consider whether or not you supply medical or dental insurance for your employees, and that as obviously increases their overall payroll costs. So there's a range from 0 if you don't provide anything to maybe up to 40% of their payroll costs. Then there's other benefits such as personal car allowances, parking, mileage, etc. And if some of the supervisors, management team have to travel back to the home office or have to travel to conferences or other items like that, then you're going to have airfare costs, you're going to have lodging, you're going to have meals and ground transportation. So you need to budget for travel appropriately. Vacation, also an add-on cost. If you pay for vacation, then you need to add in that percentage of time. And some organizations have a paid sick time program, so it allows an employee X number of days, then that would need to be factored in as an additional cost as well. Of course, you've got education, so people are going off on seminars, courses, and training. You want to cover that expense. A lot of staff incentives in contact centers, so you have pizza lunches, quality prizes, various contests. Make sure you cover that. And then sometimes if you've got some attrition in your center, you need to do some advertising, then you're going to have that expense. And some organizations bring in a consultant once a year, once every other year to just check up on things. So you need to include some money for that. Now I've put in support staff here: human resources, payroll, and benefits administration. Most people would say, well, that role would be sitting in HR, and why it's listed there is you have to consider whether or not there are people outside of the contact center who are specifically employed because of all of the people that you have within your contact center. So if you have someone in human resources or someone who is dedicated to payroll for the contact center, then that is an expense resulting from the contact center. So that's why it's suggested that you include it so you have a complete overall picture of the total expense of the contact center. So that's employee costs. Let's move on to facilities. Pretty simple to explain here. Obviously, you've got your office space. You have furniture. Now, if you're not growing and you've been in operations for a number of years, you may not have an expense here. But sometimes furniture does break. Chairs need to be replaced. Those types of things. So you might want to account for some of that funds to cover that. If your office space is not leased, then you may have electricity costs for lights, power, heat, and air conditioning. Of course, storage facilities to maybe store furniture or computer equipment, if that is off-site from your local facility, include that. Parking, if you're in a multi-tenant building where you're sharing parking spaces with other tenants, then you may have to pay a premium for additional parking spaces over and above what's normally allotted. So you need to cover that. And of course, the ever-present taxes supporting the government, you need to include those. And then what we've done here for support staff is we've thought that the building would probably cover most of the things that you need, but because contact centers need, have many more people in them on an ongoing basis, you may have to add in some additional janitorial services. So let's move on to ACD, PBX, telephone systems. General expenses here. You've got your hardware and equipment associated with the phones, and this can run from headsets to telephones to additional cabinets within your PBX ACD system. And of course, you've got annual or maybe biannual upgrades for software to keep the system up to the latest revision level. So you need to include that in your budget. If it's that time of year, you've got monthly and annual maintenance fees that you need to include. And then we've listed here moves, adds, and changes. So if you're changing items within your phone system, but you do not have an internal person to do that, then you probably have to rely on your vendor to provide those what we call MACs. And if that's the case, then you need to budget for that. Now, if you do have internal support, this again going back to that HR comment, then that technician or analyst or manager, whatever role title you have for that person, that needs to be included in your budget as well, especially if they dedicate their full time to activities in this area. So that's telephone system. Now, telecommunications, line and facility charges. So this is the physical lines coming into your building, supplied to you by your telephone company or telecom provider. So you've got that initial charge. Then you also have to consider you're going to have toll charges. If you provide your customers with a toll-free service to contact you, then there are typically charges associated with the minutes that get used up on those toll-free lines. So you need to account for that. And then of course you've got some outbound long distance charges that you need to account for as well. Then there will be other things such as service facilities, calling line ID, voicemail, automatic routing on your line and facility charges. You may even have a capacity feature that allows you to grow the number of lines in a very short period of time. That may be an add-on service feature. So look at some of those charges as well. Don't forget, the proliferation of cell phones, Blackberries, iPhones for support on your management team. Obviously, they cost to buy. They've got usually some kind of annual contract period with them. And then on top of that, you've got airtime charges. So take a look at all of your cell phone, Blackberry, iPhone charges and include that in your budget as well. Now, people to manage all of this telecom manager, maybe a telecom analyst, could have both roles, could have one of the two. So those people have to be considered into the budget as well. Similar area here now in data communications. You've got your wide area network. So again, this is the facilities that allow your contact center to connect to your mainframe computer systems, maybe connect to a virtual private network, certainly some connection into the World Wide Web. So that's going to have a monthly cost to it. Then you're going to have your internal local area network. This is the equipment that allows the computers to talk to the servers, to talk to the mainframes. So you've got some internal local area network equipment that is either capitalized or leased. Then you've got other hardware equipment that sits within the IT or telecom room, and then you've got your ongoing software costs, upgrades for this equipment, and of course, don't forget monthly and annual maintenance. Support staff, again, maybe a manager, maybe an analyst, maybe both, or maybe outsourced. So again, if it's outsourced, take a look to see if there is an additional line item charge for that kind of support. So that's data communications. Onto our last and probably biggest section, big in the sense of complexity, IT. You have software applications that will be billing applications. So your customer contacts you and you've got to go into a billing application or a customer care application. That's the platform that we're talking about. Then you have CRM applications that may provide other customer information or online help guides information. Then you've got your typical Microsoft Office platform. Then usually a litany of other different PC applications that people use. And if you're providing chat or email support to your customers, then you've got those applications to consider from an expense or a lease perspective. Now, some of those applications require licensing fees where there's so much cost per user ID. Sometimes they cost them on a per unit basis, or they're bulked together in groups of 50 licenses, 100, that kind of thing. So you need to consider whether you've got licensing fees with your software applications. And then you've got your capital costs, your PCs, call recording equipment, servers, storage, those types of items. Consider those. Then, of course, on the ongoing and ever-present maintenance for that kind of hardware. Now, relatively new trend, a lot of companies are now taking call recordings and other screen scraping recordings and moving those off-site because of compliance requirements or just because it's a wise thing to do. So you may have some off-site storage and backup facilities that need to be part of your budget. And then it's always a good idea to have sundry services, which is basically a bucket for all of the different unexpected costs that you may have within this particular area. Then you've got your support people. You're going to have hardware support, you can have software support, you're going to have application support. Now, a lot of this time it could be vendor provided or it could be internal resources, and you need to understand where that cost is and account for it appropriately. So that's the major areas. Now, it's important and a lot easier if you track your budget spend on a month-to-month basis, so you can predict what your next quarter is going to be like or what your next annual budget is going to be. So here's an example of call volume by month. And as you can see, this particular organization has two peaks within the year, late spring and in the fall. So what we do with that is we say, what's our monthly spend against the number of calls that we answer? And if you take the total budget spend divided by the calls, you get a monthly cost per call. And then what you can do is you can track that monthly cost per call. And so when it comes time to estimate budget spend in the next quarter or the next year, you can estimate what your call volume is going to be, look at your average trend in your budget, and then you can figure out what your average cost per call is. So that's really good if you have a growing business. Next year, you're going to take another, let's say, 200,000 calls. You can apply this $3.88 rate to those calls and provide your financial team with an estimate of what the additional spend is going to be. So that's one way to track your monthly budget to help you fulfill what your annual budget's going to be. So that's our session. If you want a soft copy in Excel of all these different line items, we went through them relatively quickly. Just simply email me, Clive at careforcustomers.com, and I'll send you out the email template. It'll be blank, but at least we'll have all the line items there for you. So thanks for watching the Complete Contact Center Budget. Hopefully this has helped you. Have a great day.